BBC Radio Gloucestershire.
David Smith.
Good evening and welcome to the last in our series of BBC Radio Gloucestershire election debates. We've already heard from the Cheltenham, Forest of Dean and Stroud constituencies, as well as Tewkesbury, and I'm bound to be missing one out, of course, and Cheltenham, of course. I mentioned Cheltenham at the very beginning. Tonight is the turn of Gloucester. This is it now. This is the last one this evening, and the four candidates you'll be hearing from this evening have been invited to participate based on the voting track record in the constituency over the last two elections, in line with the rules established by the broadcast regulator Ofcom. They are, for the Conservatives, Richard Graham, for Labour, Barry Kirby, for UKIP, Daniel Wolfe, and the Liberal Democrat candidate is Jeremy Hilton. Other candidates standing in this constituency: for the Green Party, Gerald Hartley. He's campaigning for a fair economy, decent affordable homes, a safer climate, investing in renewable energy, free education and better transport. George Ridgeon is standing for the Monster Raving Loony Party. He's a disabled former firefighter who's hoping to use his campaign to raise money for cancer charities. His policies include better access around the city for disabled people and only allowing hot air balloons to fly at Gloucestershire Airport to reduce noise pollution. So we've got just under an hour to talk to our candidates this evening, and you can help shape the debate. We have a number of questions to put to the candidates between now and 7 o'clock, and it's safe to say they don't know the questions that are coming, with the very exception of the last one, which has been the same throughout our debate so far. But if you have a question that you'd like us to put to the candidates tonight, email radio.gloucestershire@bbc.co.uk, or better yet, give us a call. 01452 307575, our number. 01452 307575. Let's begin then, and we'll start with the topic of health. Gloucestershire Royal Hospital is the centre of healthcare in this county. Last month, the trust that manages it finished the financial year £18 million in debt. The two main hospitals have also declared two major incidents due to bed shortages. If you're the city's next MP, what would you do to improve the situation? And we'll start with UKIP's Daniel Wolfe.
Thank you very much. It's an interesting question, one that is very, very important to the people of Gloucester and the wider county. We have a very, very good health service, which in a lot of respects, particularly in mental health care, is the envy of our neighbours and, in fact, nationwide. I took the time, I was one of the candidates that was invited down to Watton Lawn facility just around the corner. Actually, it was the same day that this original meeting this original debate was scheduled to take place, but was postponed because of events up in Manchester. And I decided to use my time to go and take that invitation and go on a fact-finding mission and speak to the health professionals about the situation, not just in the NHS, but particularly mental health care. And I would say, certainly as a UKIP candidate, and also just myself personally, I'd like to see parity of care between mental illness and physical illnesses. I'd like to see joined-up thinking between social care and the NHS. And I actually took the time, 2 hours, to listen to these professionals. I was one of 5 candidates out of 40 that were invited from Gloucestershire and Herefordshire. 40 were invited, 5 turned up, 3 of them were UKIP. From Stroud, the Cotswolds, and myself from Gloucester, and one was Labour and one was Green. So whilst the candidates may well have some very good ideas on it, I actually took the time to listen, and I just want I want the people listening, of course, out there, just to take that into account, that I took the time. That was a serious issue for me. So what's the core
thing that you would pick to improve the situation? We can talk about joined-up thinking, and that's a nice phrase to use, but what is it then?
Well, the left hand and the right hand need to talk, I think, in terms from a funding perspective. And also engagement. We need to listen to the people on the front line. We need to respond to them. We need to target the funding to them to make the decisions which are necessary at the micro level to make sure that we have a better service.
I'm going to come back to you to talk about...
Not the bureaucrats who unfortunately seem to be just bloating the system unnecessarily.
I want to come back to you to talk about money, and we'll talk about bureaucrats as well, as you put it as well. Jeremy Hilton for the Liberal Democrats. If you're the city's next MP, what would you do to improve the healthcare situation at Gloucestershire's main hospital, effectively?
Well, first of all, I rely on a National Health Service to provide my medical care, and so does my family. So it's really important to me that we actually have the best healthcare service we possibly can in the city of Gloucester. And Gloucestershire Royal Hospital, of course, is only just round the corner from where we are this evening. The Liberal Democrats are going to provide an extra £6 billion per year, every year, for the health service nationally. That's going to equate to about £42 million here in Gloucestershire.
And how are you getting that money?
And that would just before I'll tell you, that would provide an extra 250 nurses in the county as a whole. We're going to provide it. We're going to pay for it by putting a penny on income tax. So that's how we're going to raise the money to pay for the National Health Service and the social care services. We want to improve that area of support for people, and we feel that the £6 billion extra per year would go a long way to resolving the problems that you've mentioned about the stresses and strains financially within the local hospitals. Okay,
well, I think the sort of supplementary discussion on this is going to come down to money. I think we will touch on that in a moment. So, Richard Graham, if you're the city's next MP, what would you do to improve the situation?
So there are a number of issues about the NHS in general, and there are specific ones about the Gloucestershire Hospitals Trust. On the Hospitals Trust itself, which obviously includes the GRH and the Cheltenham Hospital, there have been issues of financial management. I think the new chief executive and her team have broadly got on top of those, but it's important that the new MP for Gloucester is absolutely reassured that we're not going to have another black hole in the financial accounts.
That's going to depend on what the government is, though, isn't it?
No, that was a very specific local problem. It had nothing to do with government funding. The second thing then is about the possibility of increasing the number of beds. And there is actually a capital expenditure bid in from the Hospitals Trust to the government at the moment for both Cheltenham and for Gloucester, and the next MP will want to follow up on that and try and make sure that that bid is successful. Then there are a couple of other things which are important. The first thing is that we can all help the hospital by not using the A&E department unnecessarily. It's incredibly important that people use
We'll take that as given, but what would you do to improve the situation?
Well, I would, for example, highlight the availability of doctors' appointments at the Eastgate Access Centre, which is underused. If you ring it at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can very often get an appointment the same day. So that is important. You can also show some personal responsibility by managing our health individually better so that we don't need so many calls on GPs and so many visits to the hospital. But for those who really do need them, and that's often the elderly and the very vulnerable, it is incredibly important that we have the right resources, and that is the MP's responsibility to make sure his government provides those.
I'll bring in Barry Kirby for Labour. So, Barry, if you are the city's next MP, what would you do to improve the fairly difficult health situation that certainly we've experienced in this county in the last 24 months, a couple of years at least?
Yeah, the biggest thing the Labour Party would do, which I think would affect this most directly, is integrate the NHS and the social care system. One of the biggest bed issues we've got around the system is the number of people in acute beds who then can't move on because they've got nowhere safe to go to. Either there's not the provision at home, or there's not the places that are not an acute bed for them to go to. So you've actually get a throughput through the system.
Maybe a noble goal, but it's going to require a huge investment to do that, isn't it?
It is, absolutely, and Labour is going to invest £30 billion into that through an increase in income tax on those who are the highest earners. But also, Richard does raise a very valid point as well, because there is a lot more to the health system that we can do. I was at the local pharmacy just yesterday, where it is highlighted that actually if we use them sort of facilities more, so that pharmacists can now do a lot more than they ever could in terms of providing some, low to medium level care and advice.
So keep people away from the hospitals, effectively, for as long as you
effectively.
possibly can. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. But providing an accurate amount of care, so you don't need to go to hospital. You're getting the care at a much earlier provision.
It's ingrained in people's minds that the hospital is the place I go to be looked after. A pharmacist is not a qualified medical professional. They have a pharmacy.
They would argue with that because they're highly qualified.
All right, from nurse to doctor I'm talking about primarily.
Yeah, absolutely. But actually most people want to go to their GP. That's where they want to go to, but they find they can't because there isn't enough GP provision, and that's where they're then having to go to A&E, even for some minor ailments, and so they feel that there's nowhere else to go. Actually, the pharmacist is a really important point because they are highly qualified and can do everything up to quite digging
some things like that.
Right, okay.
So that they can do quite a lot.
I'm clarifying my point there. They are indeed a qualified medical professional, but you know what I meant when it came to seeing a doctor at the very least, or a nurse at the very least. They feel they're being treated more properly and efficiently then.
It is, but we need to change our view about what a pharmacist can do, because they can do a lot more than we do because of that sort of, older thinking. We need to recognise that they are qualified health professionals and can provide a lot of support.
Let's talk a little bit more about this then, shall we? I mean, I think we need to talk about money, because it all comes down to money at the end of the day, and funding of the service, and whether or not it is money that is spent properly and spent wisely. I'll bring you back in here, Daniel. What's the spending commitments as far as UKIP are concerned? $9 billion a year for NHS England by 2021-2022. Mm-hmm. How is that being paid for?
That will become from the money that's saved on the EU payments, which we're currently locked into paying as stands.
We'll get to Brexit later, but that is a big gamble to take there. You've no idea how the negotiations are going to go, so you're ring-fencing money that you don't know is going to be there.
Well, one could say that, but the position that UKIP would take, the position that I would take as MP, and I hope the country takes, is that we get ourselves. This is what people voted on Brexit. We'll talk about Brexit in a minute.
We will. I'm sure it's on the agenda.
Let me just come back to the fact that the gentlemen, all sat here. Basically, their governments in various sizes have contributed to the funding shortfall in the NHS, which started with John Labour, was carried on with Tony Blair, and so on. We've got Labour talking about 30 billion. Well, last time they had the reins, they got 50 billion worth of PFI, which is now costing us 300 billion. So,
but you're banking on a Brexit deal to be exactly the way you want it to be to pay for it.
Let's go on another route. Then there is the possibility of cutting the foreign aid budget from 0.7% of GDP down to about 0.2%.
So everybody suffers then?
Not everybody suffers. It just means that we need to concentrate on the problems in our own country for UK citizens first. Then when prosperity rises, maybe we can go back to maintaining these commitments and give more to the rest of the world. I'm not saying don't give at all.
When prosperity rises, what do you mean by that?
Well, that's measures that maybe the people of the country should be asked about what they'd like their prosperity to be measured, not just an arbitrary measure of GDP and growth being linked to everything that's important economically. I think that's something I'll talk about again with money and economics and so on. But that touches on the environment, it touches on the way we want to do our business going forward. We can't always be looking to keep grow is the most important thing. How about, rather than quantity of stuff that we can buy, how about quality of life being a measure? We'll come back to that in a second.
I'll bring in Jeremy here. Jeremy Hill, then feel free to chip in, panellists, as we go here, because this is our open discussion element of this question here. $6 billion a year for the NHS and social care is the Liberal Democrat promise here. When is that due to be delivered by?
That'll be delivered every year throughout
the Parliament.
Throughout the Parliament, and there's also another £17 billion of infrastructure funding coming for both the health service and our schools, which will help invest in the capital projects within the county as well.
How do you know that is enough money? Because the NHS is a bottomless pit. You could throw money at it left, right and centre.
Well, that is always the case, isn't it? I mean, you could throw money at it. The important thing is that you manage the health service in the most effective way possible. And I just think that, that we've got to make a start on dealing with an issue that we've got at the moment, which was quite clearly underfunding of the health service, and the stresses there, the lack of GPs, and we all know what the issue is, why people are going to hospitals, because they can't get GP appointments, or the GPs are under a great deal of stress. They've got too many patients to deal with, and so if you can deal with that by improving the support you've got for people, then you're going to provide a better national health service. But the £6 billion is being determined is what we think will help resolve the problems we've got at the moment.
I want to get Richard Grant to address that point there directly. Not enough money going in.
Look, I think the key issue is we can all bandy around billions and billions of pounds, and there are really two key questions to it. The first one is, how credible is your plan for managing the economy that's got to deliver the tax revenues that will pay for the services we need? That's the first key question. We've got a track record of doing this. We've reduced the budget deficit from 150 billion a year, which is what we inherited, to 50 billion a year now. That's 2/3 of the budget deficit wiped out. So we know how to get the budget deficit down, how to grow the economy, the second best performing economy in the West last year, and that is what is going to deliver you the growth. And this is why growth is important, Dan, is because it delivers you those tax services, the tax revenues to fund our services. The second thing is, how much do you need for the NHS? None of us really knows precisely, but what we do know is that NHS England have got a costed plan as to what they think they need, and that is the plan that we have said we will adopt and we will fund, and it amounts to 8 billion
Hospital
more.
Ended up in this situation?
Well, Gloucester Royal Hospital and the Hospitals Trust has actually received more money every year from 2010 onwards.
It's clearly not enough,
the difficulty for them is that we're an ageing population, and with that demographic comes more visits to GPs and to hospitals.
So isn't that something the central government needs to realise when they're filtering money through?
The central government realises that, but at the same time, central government has got a responsibility to the whole population to manage the economy properly, because there is no social justice in going bankrupt. And that is a key thing. So once you know what the NHS plan is that they themselves reckon they need, and you've gone through it and you've endorsed it and you're going to back it with the money, and you know that you're going to be able to raise the money from growing the economy, then you're in a position to offer the people of this city and our country a realistic plan.
I'll bring you in just 1 second, Barry. One more point I want to make to Richard, then I will certainly bring you in indeed, Barry, here. But we talked about, we've listed the money that the Conservatives are going to bring in here, increasing NHS spending each year to $8 billion a year by 2022, so by the end of the coming Parliament, effectively. Is that going to be enough to address the needs of certainly here in Gloucestershire? And primarily I'm talking about doctors and nurses who are going to work every day with morale on the floor.
Well, look, there are two things there. The first one is it going to be enough? Well, if it wasn't for this financial black hole that the Hospitals Trust uncovered in their accounts, they would have ended last year with a modest surplus. Okay, so it can be enough as long as you manage it all sensibly. And if NHS themselves believe it's going to be enough, then there's no reason for us to second guess it.
Barry, as far as Labour are concerned, $30 billion in extra funding over the next Parliament. I work that out to be $6 billion in a year, which is no more than the Lib Dems are planning, and significantly less than UKIP and the Conservatives are planning on spending.
Yeah, but the way that we're putting it in is actually, it is, as has already been said, it's not just about the money you throw in, it's about the way you're going to deal with it. And we've been quite clear that we want to revolutionise the NHS about bringing in this social care aspect. But it is also not about the money, because we've got to remember the NHS only came into fruition under a Labour government in a time of austerity after the war, and it is now, quite frankly, the biggest thing that we should be proud of in this country.
Who are you going to clobber to pay for it?
Well, as I said before, the Labour Party really believe that those with the broader shoulders take the greatest weight.
So who's that?
It is the top 5% of earners in the UK, and that's where we would raise the income tax to raise that money.
Being punished for doing well, then. The NHS is mine whether I earn £100 million a year or £10,000 a year.
It is, but this is the fairer society that we live in across the board. I mean, we should be looking after each other, and if you've been that successful and earning that sort of money, you haven't done that entirely by yourself. You've done that. You probably own a business that has employees, that uses our roads infrastructure, the free healthcare that is provided, and you yourself, you presumably use the same thing.
But Barry, the problem with that argument, of course, is that the top 5% are already contributing about 50% of income tax, and the top 1%, 28%, double what it was under Labour. I don't believe that you yourself really believe that imagining you're just going to be able to milk the top 1 or 5% more and more and more is really going to work, because those people will move.
Right.
Well, we had this whole scaremongering of, actually, it always comes about, doesn't it? They'll all move away. No, this isn't the Liberal Democrats. We don't have the magic penny. But the point is that actually most people will contribute. I mean, I went to a launch of our international trade things in London the other day, and there was a room full of high-level business people, all willing to contribute. It's not just about the money, it's about the attitude that we have to our country. It's about whether we want a society that is fairer and looks after each other, or we just want to point at each other and how much money we've got and how much we contribute. We all know that when we work together and work in a cooperative way, we have a better society, and one that does generally work for everybody, rather than just pointing at
I'd like
individuals.
to very quickly just bring something in on the NHS, because it is an issue that came up. I came across the Naylor report and someone looking in depth into what is a very, very interesting article. It's very boring, very bland. Someone's taken the time to go through it and highlight those, and it's making quite a stir on YouTube. It's something that Theresa May backs herself. I urge the people of Gloucester to look into that, and I asked Richard, do you support Theresa May's endorsement of the recommendations in the Naylor report, and how the NHS and trusts can use that to
briefly, Richard,
basically get rid of their
Jeremy,
assets to raise revenue.
Richard, quickly.
I tell you what I endorse, which is what I've been doing for the last 7 years, giving a week of my time to volunteer in the NHS and looking after thousands of my constituents.
Okay, that's fine, but I'm asking you, do you agree with
understanding how the NHS works? I'm not interested in a report's
I'm asking about
recommendations.
the Theresa May has been quite vocal about the Naylor report in respect to the NHS on the Andrew Neil show, and I'm just asking, do you agree with your leader in that respect? Because seeing as we're asking this question here and now, it's a direct question that needs a direct answer, please.
Thank you.
Do you agree, yes or no?
Right.
There are very few issues on which Theresa May and I disagree.
Okay. Jeremy Hilton, very briefly, to contribute on this, just for 10-15 seconds. We need to move on.
Well, I think fundamentally we need to address the problem of underfunding within the National Health Service. And by putting a penny on income tax, everybody knows that's what it's going to cost them. And those on higher salaries and higher incomes will be paying more in cash terms to the National Health Service. But we would ring fence that money for not only the National Health Service, but for the social care services as well. And we've got to integrate that better as well.
OK, thank you, Jeremy. I need to move on now. So our next question, you're listening to BBC Radio Gloucestershire, our final election debate with some of the candidates for the Gloucester constituency. Hit till 7 o'clock. If you have a question for them, give us a call. 01452 307575, our number. So let's move on to question 2 then, shall we? Gloucester Quays is a vibrant part of city life now. Shops, restaurants, a cinema and apartments, and a new hotel going in there, of course, have meant that a once-forgotten corner of the city is now key to the local economy. A criticism levelled at the Quays is that it sucks money away from the rest of the city. Do you agree with this? And if so, how do you make sure the rest of Gloucester reaps the rewards of a successful docks area? Jeremy Hilton for the Liberal Democrats.
I don't think the Gloucester Quays sucks money away from the rest of the city. In actual fact, I think it's been something that's added value to the economy of Gloucester. I mean, I was there when we approved planning permission. I was one of the councillors that voted for the Gloucester Quays planning application. And the basis was that we knew this was dragging people from miles and miles away from Gloucester that wasn't coming to our city centre at that point in time. And I think it's having a knock-on effect. But we're only part of the way through the regeneration projects of the city of Gloucester. We got new student accommodation being built at Blackfriars. We've got to get that connectivity between the city centre and the docks. The docks still got spaces in the quays, and the restaurants that are there now at the moment is a much better nighttime economy. But we need to link that better with the city centre. Okay. And there's projects such as the Project Pilgrim at the Cathedral as well, and the work that's going on there. I mean, I think the big hole at the moment in regeneration is the King's Quarter project, which has failed, and we're on Plan B, and we need to get that one.
So the
working.
King's Quarter project could do well to redress the balance here. If you believe that the Quays sucks money away from the city itself, the King's Quarter project could well tip the balance back in the city's favour.
Well, I don't think it sucks money away from the city centre.
But I'm saying if your perception of that, you might be put at ease by that.
I actually think what it does is brings more people to Gloucester to spend their pennies in the city and spend their pounds in Gloucester. Okay. And I think it has a knock-on effect which has benefited the city centre. Right. I mean, we are in an economy where retail trade from shops is being competed with by the internet, and I think we need to understand that. Let me
move on. I need to move on to Richard Graham here. I think few could deny, Richard, that place every night of the week now is buzzing, is vibrant. It never ceases to amaze me when I walk around there, the transformation of Gloucester Docks in the 10 years I've lived in this county. But do you buy the argument that it is pulling money away from the city because city traders are concerned?
So the answer to the first part of it is definitely not. And the proof of it is in the statistics. There are over 5 million visitors a year now going to the docks and the quays. You've got people living there who are not living in our city before, and you've got everybody from Mike Tyndall onwards saying this is a symbol of Gloucester on the up. So all that is a huge positive, and there's more to come. You've got the Merchants Marina beside Sainsbury's, other developments of retirement homes next to Lantony, and so on. The second question, though, is more interesting, which is how do we get the city centre to benefit more from this huge influx of visitors? And I think there are 3 aspects to it. The first is we've got to complete some of the heritage projects, so Project Pilgrim at the Cathedral, the St Mary de Crypt project, and then later on the Fleece as well. And once we've done all those 3, we'll have a much more exciting, vibrant visitor attraction in the centre of the city that people will come and visit us for. Then if you add that to the festivals, the History Festival that I created, other festivals, more culture, the money we won from the Arts Council recently, that will bring more footfall into the city centre. Add that to the new people who are going to be living there in Worcester Street and in Blackfriars, the footfall will rise and we'll get a better quality of shops and the city centre will thrive.
It needs to be a better link between the city and the quays.
Yeah, the link actually isn't too bad physically, although I think there's something you could do with the crossing by the CD rack, as I've said recently. But the key thing really
this is in the Kinrose Triangle.
Yeah, is realising that city centres are about more than just shops. They've got to be an experience. They've got to have cultural things of interest. They've got to have something special happening, and that's where our festivals will help.
Okay. Barry, do you buy the argument that the Quays is pulling money away from the city centre? A lot of people are concerned.
I can see where people who have traders in the city and in the city, I can see why they would think that. But I certainly think that the city centre includes the Quays. You know, it is all one large place. But what we need to do is focus on taking the success of the Quays and how do we link up the Quays with, say, King's Quarter and get people moving all the way through there. I mean, what was really apparent after the when we hosted the Rugby World Cup is there was loads of people who came out to the Kingsholm Stadium and walked all the way to the fan zone that was in the Quays. But what we didn't do as a city is really capitalise upon that and get people coming into the city centre. A lot of people travelled from A to B and didn't pull it off. I think we need to put a lot more effort into encouraging people, and the City Council can play a part of this, as can the county, and that would be part of my job as the MP, is trying to get much better working together around this type of thing and working with the businesses to make us a more attractive centre. Because
I overcome that geography. It is reasonably a brisk walk, isn't it, away from the city centre?
And I think that is absolutely right. The actual pedestrianisation of Southgate Street and things like that, it has had some really good work and it looks really fab. But we need to get those businesses and the right type of businesses in there to attract people and to make it that element as you walk through. Okay. I think we need to look at what other city centres do as well. You've got the likes of Worcester, which really pushes a lot of independent traders quite a lot, and maybe that's something we could do in the city. Okay. But make it a real atmosphere and an environment for them to actually do that, and maybe not be so punitive in the rates that we charge.
Let me bring in Daniel Wolfe for you, Kip. I mean, are you accepting that argument? Yeah, that it's moving money away from the city.
I absolutely accept it. I'm with the people of Gloucester here. I see that the Gloucester city centre is a ghost town most evenings, and it may well be vibrant in the Quays, and that's fantastic. And for some of the facilities that are down at the Quays, that's great for the people that want to use them. They're available pretty much every single high street outlet. I agree to an extent, and this is the way I would go forward.
But what would the city be without the Quays?
Well, this is what I'm going to come to. I think, to avoid the tale of two cities, what you generally need to do is market and pump money into the idea of having independent shops with a very unique vibe to them, which plays on Gloucester's historic connections and so on. Give people the experience in town. How you do that? You drop your rates. You attract people in there. Also, on top of that, I think there should be a calendar of activity which people know about, such as the 60s and 70s markets and things where they have stuff going
Gloucester
on.
Take care of this.
Well, I'm sure, but I'm sure they do. And what I'm saying is that there needs to be more done to make the place clean, to deal with the issue of homelessness, which when the Tories are asked about having a shelter in Gloucester, point blank refused. That's an issue which is stopping people from going into the centre. Hold on a second, I'm not finished, Richard. You can come back in a second.
But my point I want to get a discussion going.
The point is, I think if we put the same amount of funding, if not more so, into the city centre as we do with the docks, then we can really address the problem. How you need to do it is you need to get alongside small businesses. I've been contacted by this Federation of Small Businesses. You need to stop penalising them in national forms of tax and so on, and locally you need to incentivise them to come in, and that will give an experience. That'll bring the footfall, that'll bring the tourism, that'll bring the employment, and the positive upward spiral will continue.
Come in here on what Daniel was talking
I was just going to say, in terms of homelessness, we actually do have an effective day centre. It's called the George Whitfield Centre, and it's got inside it an NHS Gloucester Care Services programme for the homeless and rough sleepers. It's got the Gloucester City Mission in there. It's got the food bank on the other side. It's actually interesting. Certainly Dan Wolfe hasn't been there, nor has Jeremy Hilton, even though it's in his city council ward. Barry has met the City Mission but hasn't been to the centre yet.
Richard, I'm too busy speaking to actual homeless people that don't get the benefit. I'm speaking to them. I actually took a homeless person into my home for 2-3 days. So don't please lecture me about my view on homelessness and what I'm willing to personally do about it.
See the facilities that we've got before you start talking about it.
Well, I'm not discrediting the facilities. I'm saying my view stems from personal experience of taking people in, giving them an opportunity, seeing their successes once their opportunity is given, and taking great pleasure in
Jeremy and Barry both criticised by Richard there. I'll give you the right to reply here, Jeremy.
Well, I don't need to reply to Richard if he wants to make a sideswipe. What I can say on homelessness is that 2 or 3 years ago, the county council made a decision, and it's a Conservative-run county council, to get rid of the night shelter. At that time, it had 23 beds. we've now got a situation where we've only got 8 beds in Gloucester.
Yeah, that's not true. We've got over 30.
And what we've seen is a problem with a number of people, an increasing number. It was, I think, in October it was about 21 people sleeping on the streets, and it doubled from what it had been before. Okay. So we have a problem which needs to be dealt with,
Barry,
and we need to get the policies right on that. And it's about having the facilities in Gloucester.
Okay, Barry,
it's seen the range of things that we need to do with homelessness. It is a very serious issue, and just going to a one or two things isn't going to solve it from us an MP's perspective. When I used to be a magistrate in this city, I saw the real direct effects of homelessness. It's not just homelessness; right. It's not people on the street; it's people on sofa surfing and rough sleeping.
I'll grant you that homelessness is an important point, but we've moved off the topic of primarily, which was the quays and the docks and the economy and moving people around the city.
Just one thing to pick up. I hate this language of division. I hate this idea that this tale of two cities.
Well, it's
and
becoming
that.
It's not. I'd rather not use that. You don't know Gloucester well enough because you're not actually from here, Barry. Okay, I've been here a lot longer than you, and I've seen it change.
For a second.
Wait a minute.
Excuse me. I've walked those streets a lot longer than you have, and I'm just saying.
That's the perception of people. Can you stop for a minute? I want to hear Barry for a minute. I'll come back to you in a second.
Right, I've lived in Gloucester for about 12-15 years now. In that time, it's about what I've done with this city. I've been a magistrate within this city. I've been a parish councillor within the city. I've been a county councillor within the city. I've worked with residents' associations. I've done a lot of voluntary work in this city. So, and I brought my family up here. 2 out of my 3 children were born here, and all my family been brought up here. So for you to sit there and say that I'm not from this city. This is where I call home. I've served my country and be in the forces.
I've moved
around the city.
Going up to Copeland to stand in seats up there because that's where you're from.
No, well, I was born in Cumbria, and yes, but I never actually stood for the Copeland seat, so I don't know what that's about.
I'm just confused. We're getting off the point. We are wandering way off the point here, and I'm not getting into this. I'm not getting into how long it takes for you to live in Gloucester before you belong here.
Exactly.
I don't think we'll get started on that. Let's move on to another question, shall we? Let's move on to a question about Brexit, which is something I'm sure that you'll have a fair amount to say here, Dan, about this one. Gloucester voted to leave the EU. 58% of those who voted. Turnout was 77%. Mm-hmm. The question here is, what type of Brexit would you prefer? Richard Graham for the Conservatives.
The thing about Brexit is there is only one type of Brexit. As Donald Tusk said himself, there is no hard Brexit or soft Brexit. It's about whether you're leaving the European Union or not. And if you are leaving the European Union, then you cannot be a member of the single market and you cannot be a member of the customs union, because if you were, you wouldn't be able to have your own free trade agreements and you'd have to accept free movement.
So it's a hard Brexit for you?
No, it's not. It's not a boiled egg, David. There is no such thing as a hard or soft Brexit. It is Brexit. And the country has already decided, and however we all voted, I voted Remain, many in Gloucester voted to leave, we have to accept that decision was made. It was a democratic decision, and everybody was told that however you vote is what we will implement. And that's what matters now. The important thing in this election is to realise that there is only one party with a credible plan for negotiating hard to get a good deal, and that is our party. It is not acceptable, I don't believe, to the British people to start having a second referendum and then perhaps a third or fourth, so the country has to keep on voting before they get the sort of right EU decision, which of course would be to stay in the European Union. We've got to get on with it, we've got to do it, we've got to get a good solution, a humane one that allows European citizens to stay here and all the rest of it. That is a big part of what this election is about.
Okay, Barry Kirby for Labour. What type of Brexit would you prefer?
I would like a Brexit that works for everybody, quite frankly. I think we need to go into...
It's going to be hard to find, isn't it?
Well, it is, but I don't see that it's completely impossible. I think the Labour approach for this is really good in the fact that we go and we will try and get the best deal possible. We don't believe in the no deal approach. We think if you get to a no deal, then you've failed, and this country will be worse off for that. We are one in looking at a vast array of countries. Any one of them can shoot our deal down, as Canada has seen.
All right. So do you buy into this? There's no hard Brexit or soft Brexit argument that Richard's just put forward.
I really think that actually what Brexit means different things to different people. I think when we look at what different people think is involved in the EU, people have different views on that. Some people thought, as soon as the referendum was over, that we'd left that we'd left Europe straight away.
Was that down to bad education on both camps during the campaign?
I think it was down to bad education across the piece. A lot of people didn't actually recognise, and politicians included, I think, what actually a referendum was all about, and the fact that it wasn't a mandatory thing, it was an advisory to government. I think that a lot of people didn't realise exactly what the scope of what the
to pay if it wasn't carried out, though, wouldn't there?
Well, there would be, but I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have carried it out, but I'm just saying that in terms of our political education, there could have been a lot more done. I mean, there was this bus going around with 350 million on the side. Now everybody will cry, oh, that was clearly not true. But a lot of people believed that. A lot of people thought that £350 million was going straight into our NHS the following day, and it clearly wasn't. I think the campaigns on both sides had a lot to go with.
Bring in other candidates here. Daniel Wolfe for UKIP, it was pretty thumping, I think it's fair to say, for Leave, 58%. On a 77% turnout, granted, but it was still a very clear win. So what type of Brexit would you prefer for the people of Gloucester?
There was Brexit, that was it, and it was quite straightforward. We're leaving the EU, we want to get out of the common market, we want to get out of the single currency, and that's as clear as day for me on that one. So this hard Brexit, soft Brexit came afterwards. It was part of the 9 months worth of dallying about that Theresa May has done, rather than just getting on and triggering Article 50 and so on.
But preparations have to be made, though.
Well, preparations have to be made, agreed. I mean, I just want to take the people back just before the referendum,
so
where hold on a second. We had Theresa May down here in Gloucester. Actually, she was invited down by Mr. Graham. She said that leaving the EU would be a shock to the economy and would hurt the people here in Gloucester over the coming years. Now, obviously, she's had to change her view to uphold the will of the people, both nationally and particularly here in Gloucester. You've also got hold on a second. True, you've got Mr. Graham also at the same time saying the Out campaign lost the battle of the economy, trade and jobs. So their campaign has been entirely based on immigration and unnecessary scaremongering. So approximately 60% of Gloucester, 41,000 people, voted based on scaremongering.
Of the people that voted. Not of the city itself, of the people that voted.
41,000 people, they decided to vote Leave, 60% and so on. So, my question is, they didn't vote because of scaremongering. They didn't, vote because of scares on immigration. They knew the argument. They knew the arguments.
I want to let Jeremy come in, and then I'll give you a chance to come back.
They knew the arguments, and I respect the people of Gloucester enough to have the nous and understanding to make an informed decision on such an important issue.
Jeremy Hilton for the Liberal Democrats. Jeremy, move on, Jeremy.
To go back on that is
go on. What type of Brexit would you prefer?
Well, let's put it this way. I voted yes in 1975, and I voted Remain in 2016. And I believe Britain's best place would to be remain within the European Union.
But it's not happening. We're leaving.
Oh, we've had a Brexit vote, and now we've got to look at what that Brexit means. And we frankly don't know what that Brexit means, because Richard's not told us and Barry's not told us.
We don't know till the negotiations happen, do we?
But that's the point. And my view is that what we should do is stay within the single market. That's vital for the jobs, vital for jobs in Gloucester as well, and vital for the economy of the UK, and for trading arrangements, trading arrangements across the whole of Europe, if we're in there. And Norway's in there, and it's not part of the European Union.
But if you look at the number one issues that people voted to leave the EU, top of the pile is immigration. And staying in this single market means freedom of movement, doesn't it? So it can't be done, because it's disingenuous to go that way, because people didn't vote for that.
Yeah, well, I don't know what people voted for, because everybody voted for different reasons. So why they voted to remain or why they voted to leave. But the issue is
immigration.
You're asking my opinion. Well, most immigration comes from outside the European Union, but we've also got a lot of people in Gloucester that are EU citizens. They're either married to British citizens, or they're working in our health service, working in our public services. And we ought to, at this point in time, straight away, no equivocation, say that you have a permanent right to remain. But you talk about freedom of movement. It means all our young people in Gloucester growing up now and in the future will lose their right to go and work in Europe, to live in Europe, to go to university in Europe, to marry, and to be able to move across borders with ease. Because if we remove ourselves from the European single market, those rights are taken away, and we have to renegotiate them. That's why when the Brexit deal has been signed and sealed, we need to have a new referendum so the people of Gloucester and the people of this country can decide whether they accept it or they reject it.
I need to bring in Richard, but another referendum, for goodness sake. People are fed up of voting, aren't they? For goodness sake, two elections in 2 years, a referendum, let the politicians get on with it. It's what we elect you for.
Yeah, but by having the new referendum on the deal, make sure that Richard and the people that are doing the negotiations come back with a really good deal, rather than...
So Richard's going to be doing the negotiations then? You just admitted defeat, have you?
Basically given it to him.
Well, if he wins the seat, yeah, he would do that. But I'm talking about the people that are in House.
I want to bring Richard in here. Richard, you wanted to reply
to
what Daniel was saying at one stage.
I think the key thing is, look, if we go back to the referendum, I took the view, and I spelt it out in my e-news to about 15,000 constituents, that I thought the risks, on balance, outweighed the longer-term potential opportunities. Okay. But the important thing is the people decided otherwise. So you've only got two options in that situation. You either say, right, that's it, it's a disaster, we must have another referendum, let's try and do it all over again, get a different decision this time. That's a very European way of going about things. They've done that before in Ireland and France. That's the Lib Dem approach. Or you can take the pragmatic Conservative approach, which say the people have decided. Now we've got to make sure that as far as possible we do find those opportunities and mitigate the risk. That's what Theresa May is doing.
Do you think the problem was with the question?
My position
the question was leave or remain. There wasn't a type of Brexit on the ballot paper,
of course,
which I think concerns a lot of people.
Of course, and that's why the business of the best deal is important. And the weakness of the Labour position on this is that by saying at the beginning that we're not going to have no deal, you're taking off one of the key negotiating cards, because that means immediately that the European Commission is able to say to themselves, OK, it doesn't matter how awful our best deal for the UK is, the Labour government, if they were in power, would accept it, because they've said that no deal would be worse.
No deal would be worse.
Not necessarily, and that's the important part of a negotiation.
But this is kind of the attitude that I think is really going to sink our country if we're not careful, because Labour will take a more compassionate approach. That's true. I mean, I think
negotiations is not about compassion. Well, it's about being hard-headed. That's how Mrs. Thatcher got the great rebate out of the European Commission.
We are dealing with people.
Well, hang on, whoa, I'm coming back to you, Dan. I'm coming back to you in a second, Dan. Let Barry have a go, and I'll come back to you when you come back.
This is about people. And firstly, the Labour Party is quite straight up by saying all the people that who are already living in Gloucester and have the right to remain from the European countries, we wouldn't be bargaining with their lives. You know, that is just a non-starter. That is not the way to do business. But if you go in and then we do the deals, there's still a way of doing deals that are compassionate. You've got to be tough in a negotiation, though. You've got to be hard and tough in a negotiation.
Actually, no.
Why? Yeah. Why? If Europe and the UK are as mutually
Europe
dependent,
wants the best for Europe, yes, not the best for Britain.
But the thing that we've been told, particularly by Dan and that is that Europe is dependent on us as the other way around. Therefore, if we are as mutually beneficial to each other, it is in everybody's interest to come up with the best deal for everybody, not just bully down the UK. Now, if we're going to go down the no deal approach, then what do we walk away with? We walk away with nothing and lose over 40% of our trade. And it is all very well saying that we go and open up these new markets. We should be doing that anyway.
We can't keep having endless referendums.
I absolutely agree, because and then the final bit I wanted to bring in.
So no vote on the deal.
No referendum on the deal, but a vote in Parliament. Vote in Parliament on the deal, making sure, because again,
and what happens if that is rejected?
Well, let's face it, nobody's done Brexit before. Nobody's done any of this. There is already if it can be negotiated, there is a mechanism to extend the time to then push it further. But at the end of the day, we've got to come up with the best deal that we can. We can't just no deal.
I want to bring in Daniel Wolf for you, because you wanted to make a point.
Yeah,
or two
no,
here.
thank
Dan,
you.
Go on.
Basically, I just find it astounding in a place which is so overwhelmingly voted for Leave and voted for Brexit. They knew what we were doing. We have three gentlemen in the place which are total Remainers. How can they even be trusted? I mean, I
Are we still using that language? Are we still saying Remainers and Leavers?
Well, because it's important. You've raised the question. It's very important for the people of Gloucester. No, hold on a second. Excuse me. I've listened to you. There's a lot about politics that maybe I don't understand, because I'm young and I'm learning, and I'm willing to accept that, and I'm willing to learn. And if you look at my track record, I'm also a very quick study.
Let's get that out of the point. Shall we? Let's go back to the topic of Brexit.
The point is, the people of Gloucester, I think, would want someone who represents that particular view on Brexit 100%. Not change their mind on it for political convenience. Not change their mind on it because the people from on high decided they're going to take this view.
And the 42% can just go and hang, can they?
No, well, you say 42%. It's 42% on that day. I think if you would to ask them
on
now,
a turnout of 77%, so let's compute the maths down.
Democracy is democracy. I'm talking about Gloucester here. We're talking 59% near enough. Way more than 50. Not even close to marginal.
But you're forgetting the other 42.
Well, hold on a second, but I'm here to represent the people of Gloucester.
But only the 58% who voted Leave, by the sounds of it.
Well, not only the 58%. I'm trying to find some accommodation. If more people for everyone here, but if you're talking on balance, the majority of people in Gloucester wanted this. How can they put their trust in someone who personally voted Remain and who will only change that opinion to try and win a seat?
Jeremy Hilton for the Liberal Democrats.
Yeah, well, I think the people of Gloucester could trust me over this issue. And if I was...
You want another referendum?
No, if I was a Member of Parliament, I would be arguing in Parliament for us to stay within the European single market and within the customs union.
But people knew what they were voting for. We're going around in circles. People knew what they were voting for.
No, they didn't vote. They didn't know what they were voting for. They didn't know they were leaving.
So we don't trust people with their own intelligence then?
They were not. They did. We were told we're leaving the European Union and Brussels bullying us and all this nonsense.
Which means a single market, doesn't it?
No, it does not, because the single market is an economy where it's got the same rules. It's got rid of all the red tape. It's got the one rule book which we all trade under. Okay. It benefits our businesses because the French or the Romanians or whoever they are can't change the rules at that local level to disadvantage British companies exporting into those areas. Richard, if we leave the European single market, we'll end up with a whole load of different rules.
Richard's in agreement with you.
Jeremy is partly right on this. The single market does have huge benefits for our businesses, and that's why it's important that in the negotiations we effectively replicate the advantages of the single market and the customs union with a really strong free trade agreement with the EU. It can be done, and that's exactly what we'll be trying to do.
Okay, Barry Kirby for Labour, very quickly if we can.
No, I just find it interesting that we need to understand what this whole politics bit is about now. The Brexit vote is done. We are moving forward, unless you're a Liberal Democrat, and we are trying to. But the skill is now implementing the best deal for the UK.
But the Liberal Democrats are offering an escape lane, if you like. Here, if the deal is not the right deal, we don't have to take it.
Yeah, but what we're saying is that the escape plan is just going back to have another expensive referendum again. We've had the referendum. The British people have told us what they want, and that's where I do agree with Daniel.
I want to move on because we need another question here.
We don't know what the Labour position on Brexit really is at all, because they're split completely in two, and I think that's makes it very difficult for Barry and others.
I don't think it does at all. I think our position is very clear. We are leaving.
We don't know anybody's position of all the parties until we actually get round to the negotiating table, because people are keeping their cards close to their chest because we don't want to reveal the hand here.
UKIP's been very clear.
The difficulty for the Labour Party is that half of them would like to stay in from the metropolitan seats, and the other half accept democracy.
But then there's a lot of Conservatives there, Richard.
I want to move on to another question, which has been texted in by Tom here. It says the national debt is an eye-watering £1.7 trillion, and the annual interest that we pay on this debt is £48 billion. This is an issue that is hardly talked about in this election. What do the candidates think of this issue? And we'll start with Barry Kirby for Labour.
Yeah, it's very clear. I mean, the current debt position. I mean, everybody went on after the last Labour government about how much debt we got into because of the international crisis that we had.
The famous note that was left. There is no money left.
It certainly was. But that was an international issue to deal with, and Labour was dealing with that. The Conservatives then went in with their ideological cuts, and we now got more national debt than not only the last Labour government got, but any Labour government in history. So this is a real issue that we need to deal with, and yeah, absolutely, this is why we've got our costed manifesto that aims to bring down that national debt, but also deliver a manifesto and services for the good of everybody.
Daniel Wolfe for UKIP. How do we get this under control then?
Well, I think, first of all, you can't just always spend your way out of problems. You need to, you've got to tighten on your spending, number one, but we don't want the full measures of austerity. We don't want the cuts that have been imposed. So you need to think about how you're going to do that in the short term. We've talked, obviously, it's an independently costed manifesto of the UKIP, and I've already mentioned about EU payments and foreign aid and so on. That's obviously where we claw back the most of it. Going
forward, can't spend your way out of problems. You need to invest, though, don't you?
You do need to. I'm coming, and you're absolutely correct. And, if you look at FDR and what he did with the New Deal post, in the 30s, post depression in America, you have to invest, and you need to make sure you invest in people. You need to invest in infrastructure, and you need to grow your way out of the problems long term. But I go a stage further as a student of economics, and also someone who's you understands biology and whatnot. I think going forward, and I'll get to the point on this one. We need to think about our economic model and how we are sustainable. It's all very well to grow, and I mentioned this earlier about GDP and all this kind of business. Yes, the deficit is important. Yet getting the national debt down is important as well. But over and above that, we need to then look forward for more than just this parliament, more than just this term, and actually think about how we go forward to be a sustainable, carbon neutral economy, which is truly sustable.
How big a priority for UKIP is answering this question, though?
Well, all right.
Realistically,
answering the question, we do need to steady the ship and balance the books, but there are issues which are higher up the priority list that people want answers to in the short term, and if we answer those questions, in part, we will help to address some of the drains on the economy which contribute to that debt.
Because if Brexit goes badly, that £1.7 trillion goes up.
I have absolute confidence that Brexit will not go badly as long as we have definitely not the strongest, the brand of strong and stable leadership that Theresa May, the pirouetting Prime Minister, has no idea
Jeremy
about.
Hilton,
But actually
for
bringing the
Liberal
Commonwealth.
Democrats, I want to bring you in here because we're running out of time here. What do you think about this national debt? Thomas drops us this text here. Eye-watering, £1.7 trillion, he says. The annual interest we pay on the debt, $48 billion. It's an issue that's hardly talked about in this election. What do you think of this?
Well, I think if we hadn't joined the coalition in 2010 and hadn't helped the country get out of the mess that it was in, that debt that we had would be even greater than it is today. And we've helped reduce the deficit. I mean, it's in our plan that we would eliminate the deficit on day-to-day spending by 2020. And that's by having a balanced budget. And we've had our manifesto considered externally.
Eliminate the deficit.
Eliminate the deficit by 2020.
You can factor in all the murky waters financially of Brexit then?
Well, this is the problem, because we think that...
Is this based on staying in the EU then?
Well, it could well be based on staying in the EU.
Well, it's not happening.
Because I think the real problem is that by leaving the European Union, by leaving the single market, we are looking at the biggest bit of self-harm to the British economy that we've ever seen, certainly in my lifetime.
You can't make a plan on something that's not going to happen.
Well, if you're in government, you can change things, can't you?
And you're going to be.
So if you're in government, you can change things. And one of the things we would do in government would be to stay within the single market and a customs union. And therefore, we wouldn't put at risk the economy that maybe the Conservatives, the Labour Party would do. And
do you think that's a red line in our own Parliament on Thursday night, Friday morning then? Let's be hypothetical here. For you, is that a red line?
Well, the red line in Parliament is that we'll be...
if it's a hung Parliament, if you're going into coalition negotiations...
It's a hung Parliament, then the largest party takes power. That's the way it's decided. We're not participating in a coalition with either the Labour Party or the Conservatives in this Parliament.
This debt has gone up and up and up. Despite austerity, we're still in huge amounts of debt.
Quite. And that, of course, is the difficulty. The interest alone on the enormous mountain of debt that we've got is greater than what we spend on education every year. So it cannot be right. As one of the Labour Party candidates for the leadership said, I think Liz Kendall was backed by Barry, she said you cannot have social justice without a strong economy.
So did George Osborne fail as Chancellor then?
Well, George Osborne got the deficit down 2/3, as I mentioned earlier, from $150 billion to $50 billion. He did. And the reason for that was precisely because actually you do have to do it compassionately. There are some cuts that you can do and people will accept, and there are others which are really, really difficult. So we're spreading it out over a longer period of time. To 2025.
Yes, that's not going to happen. The promise was to eliminate the deficit by the end of this Parliament. That's not going to happen now, is it?
I agree. It will happen, I think, close to that, because this Parliament will finish in 2022. It has. That's quite right.
It's a failure of the Conservative government then.
You can argue that, but you could also say that actually trying to do it at great haste, as the Liberal Democrats are promising, is unrealistic. They'd have to find another $50 billion a year over and above their promises in the manifesto. And the truth is that finding additional cuts at this stage is very hard. So you've got to focus on growing the economy from here on.
We need to move on to our last question. We've got 2 minutes left.
Taking account
we need to move on.
The economy is going to go down the pan because of Brexit.
I want to move on. I want to move on to the last question here, which our candidates were notified of in advance here. What is the number one priority for you if you are elected as Gloucester's new MP on Thursday night, Friday morning? For UKIP, Daniel Wolfe, and you've got about 30 seconds.
For me, it is making sure that the city centre gets regenerated and that we have equality within the city centre, that we have a clean and vibrant city, and that we look after the homeless people, particularly those that served in our armed forces.
Number one priority.
Gloucester City regeneration and cleanliness.
Thank you very much indeed. Jeremy Hilton for the Liberal Democrats.
I would agree with Daniel on this. It's Gloucester City's regeneration. That's what I've been doing for a number of years as a local councillor, and I want to help the local councils and the private investors secure funds and projects to carry on with the regeneration of this wonderful city.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Richard Graham for the Conservatives.
So the one thing that I would really love to achieve for Gloucester in this next Parliament is setting up a university technical college for health and care. This was my idea about 2 years ago. I've got the absolute support of all the NHS trusts, the University of Gloucestershire, and quite a lot of businesses as well. The Education Secretary and others have looked at our proposal. They like it. They haven't yet decided on when to do another round of bidding for these UTCs, but when they do, that is is something which will absolutely transform the opportunities for many young people in the city and the county to get into the health and care sectors, the biggest employer in Gloucestershire.
Thank you very much indeed. And Barry Kirby for Labour.
My number one issue is housing, about developing good housing that is affordable, because that enables us to deal with homelessness, and it also develops jobs through infrastructure, and it underpins so much of what is going wrong with the city and the wider issues that housing, particularly on housing on brownfield sites, has to be the number one priority for me.
OK, thank you. And thank you all for coming in this evening. And that concludes our series of BBC Radio Gloucestershire election debates. My thanks to all the candidates who participated. And yes, polling day is just a couple of days away. Hasn't that come round quickly? Of course, full coverage from across our 6 constituencies here on BBC Radio Gloucestershire. On the night from 10 o'clock when the polls close, of course. Listening through the night to a special election programme here on BBC Radio Gloucestershire. I shall be here probably with some very strong coffee, I should imagine, through the night, bringing you the results as we go through to the wee small hours, and who knows what awaits us on Friday morning when you wake up if you can't stick with us through the night. Thank you for your company this evening. Back with you, as I say, Thursday evening into Friday morning for our general election results programme. Georgie Spanswick follows the news, which is next.